Oops. Welcome, everyone. I'm Francesco Bellino, Managing Director at BCG, in charge of social impact and sustainability activities. And I will have the honor and the pleasure today to play the role of the moderator for an exciting session we will have around social innovation as a driver for business. Through the next hour, we will explore through different speakers that will join me on stage how social innovation can really play the role as an engine for inclusive growth, for economical growth, and for value for the ecosystem and the companies. We will have 3 different moments throughout the session, and the first one will be a speaker note from Jean-Philippe Courtois, who will join me in a minute. Just a few words of introduction on Jean-Philippe. Jean-Philippe is today Executive Vice President and President on National Transformation Partnerships at Microsoft. Jean-Philippe is a builder. He has been, I think, almost 40 years at Microsoft, contributing, building the company into the tech leader that we all know. And throughout the different roles that he covered in the companies, always with a focus on how to create the condition for sustainable and inclusive economic growth through digital transformation. You are a builder also beyond your work at Microsoft. You founded in 2015 with your family one foundation, Life for Good, which aims at connecting youth and young people with opportunities to thrive, to grow in business, and also experiencing social innovation as a driver for business. Social innovation, I assume you also cover and think about it through your board membership at Manpower, which really deals with entrepreneurs, employees, and workforce. And today, I welcome you on stage to share with us your perspective on social innovation and the value that it can bring to business communities. Please.
Thank you, Francesco. Good morning. Great to be actually in my hometown in Paris, to be clear. So I've actually essentially been walking to this place. Excited to be part of the ChangeNOW event. I've been there years back at the very first edition, and I love the place. So clearly, Francesco already introduced me. You can call me JP. That's also an easier way for people to call me around the world. I've got a few personas, like many of you, work in Microsoft. I'm working for Satya Nadella, the executive team, and I'm passionate about supporting and embracing transformation partnership with governments, countries around the world, using digital as a power for positive change. I'm also passionate by positive leadership. I've even committed a podcast on that topic. And finally, today, it's a fantastic opportunity to launch a new initiative, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is about entrepreneurship for positive impact. And so, as you can understand, I've tried to marry all my lives with one person, me. And it's all about trying to use the power of great platforms, technology, expertise, support partners to make a change for good in the world. And so what I'm going to talk about is really the very unique power of what I'm calling positive impact entrepreneurs. So what is that about? To me, they fall into 2 categories. The first one are social entrepreneurs. I'm sure many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Social entrepreneurs are led by a mission to change the world against one of the 17 UN SDG goals or many. On the other hand, you've got tech-led startups companies that are creating, using the power of technology to scale a positive impact with a set of technology in one of the aspects of environment, sustainability, inclusion, and more. And so this is really what I'm going to talk about, is how we do that. So first of all, don't know if my slides are moving. Yes. First of all, I'd like to talk briefly about the why. I think all of you being here, I don't need to lecture you on the why. You fully got that. The sad news is we've been going backwards on the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as you're probably aware. Just taking very briefly 3 examples. On poverty, the pandemic had actually some very negative impact in terms of health, economic, social outcomes on poverty. It's indeed the first time for the last, I think, 25 years that poverty has gone up again, with another 120 million people going into the extreme poverty. You shift and you go to climate change. Actually, right here in this place, you can feel the climate change, I think, in this room as well, which is okay because it's about living the reality of the world. And this is obviously a place where you are all aware of what's going on. And just a couple of data points, like the latest NASA data, talking about ice sheet basically, growing down by like, I think it's 427 billion metric tons in the last 20 years. And when you look at the sea levels as well, that have been risen, I think the precise measurement is 3.94 inches. You have to believe in my data. Those are the official data. And the last one is on unemployment and jobs. With the pandemic, particularly in a number of fast-growing and emerging countries in the world, pandemic has been hitting very hard. Poor people, minorities, women, and it's like 255 million people without a job in the world. So the why is clear. We are going backwards, not forward. And I think this is the reason why we certainly need to understand the context. I'm an optimist, by the way. I'm an optimist. You have to believe me, I'm an optimist. And here's what I see as a context in the world happening over the last couple of years as well, with all those bad signals I was talking about. I see a number of systemic changes happening in the world. And I'm just going to mention a few of them. The first one, you know it, consumers are voting with their wallet. And this is just one example. About 50%, PwC survey, I think 50% of consumers have decided to opt for eco-friendly products, which is a big trend. And so they are banning, as a result, other brands and companies who don't respect that. Then you go into people, employees. This is not anymore about youth and millennials. I see a lot of them in the room. I can tell you, I meet with employees coming from all ages, pyramid age, from 30, 40, 50, who clearly are all seeking for a purpose in their job. And you know what I mean. And the purpose of the job means that it needs to be a meaningful work and life together. And interesting enough, there was a survey by Edelman during the so-called Great Resignation in the US. You may have heard about that. It's a big phenomenon where people quit companies by millions, okay? All across the pyramid of jobs. By the way, it's not just the tops, middles, and bottom jobs between cuts as well. 61% of the people who've been quitting their jobs, that's the first time ever it was so high, have been quitting their companies because they are not aligned anymore with the values and the beliefs of the company. Meaning, it's not about just the money they get, it's about the way they're treated, the way the company does things, they behave, and that's a huge shift as well. You've got obviously governments across the world spending on our behalf as citizens in the US, the Biden administration, in the EU, in my home country in France, President Macron and the governments, trillions, a lot of zeros, of euros and dollars into resiliency fund, welfare, and also greening the economy. You could say that's good news. Well, yes, but in many cases, honestly, that money doesn't land well on the last mile. It means it's very ineffective in many cases. And the last one, which I think maybe connect with many of you who also have a corporate life, I believe we are the turning point for the corporate world. I mean it. I've been in the corporate world for almost 40 years of my life, as Francesco said, in a pretty large company and meeting with many large companies in the world. And what I see is bigger than a digital transformation I've been pitching myself for like ever in my Microsoft life. It is really all about this sustainability, social, environmental change happening with the world. And in many ways, to take a shortcut, I think we are on the verge of seeing a shift from CSR and philanthropy to ESG. I'm just using that as a formula to say, hey, it's not going to be okay anymore for any large or small company to just, I'm not saying that negatively, by the way, please, to check a box. Okay, I've got my CSR plan, I've got some philanthropy funds for that good initiative, that good charity. No, they will have to instrument the business at the core, the way they design products, services, supply chain, value chain, all the way. So those are the positive forces for good, I think, because they're going to drive all the constituencies to do something about those big challenges for the society. And so in that environment, we, Microsoft, are very grounded, of course, on our mission. We have a mission. This is the second one we had in 48 years of existence, I think, altogether. And it's about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And when we say that, we mean that technology is not an end in itself. It's a technology capability that can truly enable any of the constituencies I was talking about to do more based on their goals, based on their mission they want to achieve. That's why we always complete that sentence saying we want to do that to enable a sustainable, inclusive, and a responsible future for all. So that's the foundation we have as a company. And what we try to do is really contribute to some of those goals in our humble way. I don't want to take any credit for that. And of course, there are some huge problems in the world, the 17 goals. We decided to be even more intentional in focusing on 4 of the 17 UNSG goals and try to, in a way, align some of our capabilities as a company, technology, innovation, people, go-to-market, ecosystems, and more, to contribute. And so a few very quick examples on that. Quality education. We've been developing with UNICEF a learning platform for the millions of children in the world that have been impacted by natural disasters, wars, and they're going from one place to another one without any learning journey. So we have the platform for those kids to do that. Same happening on economic decent work and growth. We've been designing and driving a skilling training program globally, and we've been reaching out, certifying 48 million people on the planet to bring digital skills to life. From low-end literacy digital skills to the highest end, like data scientists, cloud architect, and more, and everything in between, because all organizations, from NGOs to public sector enterprise, need those jobs, meaningful jobs. Climate change, so much to be said, just mention one fact. We have created a fund called Climate Innovation Fund with $1 billion grant just to actually go and unleash some innovation coming from other organizations, not from Microsoft, and try to go and support financially, but also with our resources, the most innovative energy, I would say, transformers we can find in the world. And last but not least, of course, it's all about peace, justice, reconciliation, so much to say those days, of course, about that. One example would be the technology we've developed, Account Guard, which has been enabling 20 democracies in the world to protect the safety and integrity of elections. And that's, as you know, a big thing. It's not something we should take for granted in every country in the world. So that's, in a way, the path we are taking. But it's clear to us, to me in particular as well, that we cannot do that alone. I'm not naive. The change for good is something that needs to be built through coalitions, through partnerships. And this is what I want to bring to life, I think, the people who, in a way, are the change makers, building, driving that social innovation in the world today. My so-called positive impact entrepreneurs. That's the theory of change we have. And so we, as a company, we started experimenting for the last couple of years an initiative called Global Social Entrepreneurs. We've been working with hundreds of entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, globally. And today we are announcing, it's actually the day of the announcement, it was a post on LinkedIn this morning I just did, this initiative which is about unleashing the power of social innovation through those change makers in the world so that they can bring that innovation back to the corporate world, to the public sector, and to the civic society. So in other words, it's about really using the incredible innovation happening socially and technologically together to have a positive impact on some of those key UN SDG goals, or the so-called ESG, that all enterprises are going to seek for now. And that initiative will be about doing a few things. So we'll be unrolling and embarking a few hundreds of entrepreneurs in the world. Next week, I will be announcing a partnership with the Bnpp Foundation and the Worldwide Economic Forum with a global coalition for social entrepreneurs, where we're going to accompany 25 of their most advanced social entrepreneurs to get them to take intensity and capacity to scale up. Because what's lacking the most is the scale up of those solutions globally. And so we're going to bring a number of benefits to the table. Number one, we're going to bring access, of course, to our startup community with positive impact called Founders Hub. We're going to give them access up to $150,000 of benefits using our Azure platform, Dynamics 365, GitHub, development tools, and so on. We're going to give them access to our best people, engineering team support, to truly ideate and do more with their solutions, to hit the ground. And eventually, last not least, because that's the vision we have, it's about really enabling them to move their solution onto a marketplace, which is digital marketplace, and go to market together. Because the theory we have, more than a theory, is the solution that exists in the world can truly help all the corporate world in particular to instrument their ESG roadmap. And the government as well is going to need a lot of real tangible solutions, not just policies and statements, on how we do waste management, how we do water, how we do inclusion for the jobs, and so on and so forth. So we are very excited to announce that initiative today. It's just the very start. We are humble because I know we're going to learn as much as we're going to bring to the table. I see that as a two-way partnership, just to be clear. I see that as a way for Microsoft and many other companies to learn from the social innovators who are on the front line, the people who are doing it. Not who are talking about it, but who are doing it. In that context, I'm very pleased to actually welcome on stage one of such changemakers. So please welcome Alban, who is joining me, to have a little dialogue with Alban. Welcome.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe.
Alban, welcome on stage. Alban is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Reforestum. So Alban, please tell us more about Reforestum, the journey, what it's all about, and yeah, kind of the vision you have as a company.
With pleasure. Thank you so much for having me speak here. It's a pleasure to be with you at ChangeNOW. So for context, what we do at Reforestum is we really bring companies and their consumers together in supporting forestry projects around the world that sequester carbon. And the way we do that obviously has a project component to it, and we can talk about that. But of course, a technology component to it. And we found one of the missing pieces is really the trust in those projects for both the companies, but also consumers voting with their money, as you said, to kind of trust that what they're doing is really having the impact it says. So that's what we do, adding layers of technology to those projects. 2 years ago, I was here at ChangeNOW, right before the pandemic, if I remember well. And I actually met someone from Microsoft who encouraged us to apply to this global social entrepreneurship program.
Yes.
So we did, and you know, we definitely got to experience not just a boost in credibility, which bear in mind, a young startup like ours, we had no or almost no full-time employees, very little money. We got that boost in credibility. We got to work with some of those experts, realize, I think, to some extent how little we knew about some aspects of the problem that a lot of people had been working for a long time, looking at algorithms, you know, analyzing carbon and so on. And so fast forward 2 years, we're now 12 people in the company, 11 projects in 6 countries, half of which we developed ourselves with our partners, new projects. So yeah, very proud to be here, and thanks again.
Well, first of all, congrats on these first 2 years, but what's next? Because I think you've got gross ambitions now.
Of course.
To go and do more for CO2 sequestration and for companies to actually use that effectively.
Of course. I mean, to your point, you know, it requires investment to get anything started up, and of course, we're no exception. So this week, we actually launched our fundraising, and I've had a great few days here at ChangeNOW, meeting with investors and new partners. But it's also really about tapping into that ecosystem you mentioned and having that contribution. So if you don't mind maybe putting the next slide, I try to illustrate, you know, with this diagram, it's about having a multiplier effect. It's about, you know, standing up on the shoulders of others, partnering up with larger corporates. And we're fortunate to have had some great use cases already. But for us, that's the next step. It's really bringing our platform to scale the impact we can have.
No, I'm looking forward to that, Alban, because clearly your customers that we address, Microsoft, for their digital transformation, guess what? They ask us to do more when it comes to their sustainability plan. We've announced as a company a cloud for sustainability platform, actually, and we're going to plug a lot of the social innovators on top of that to have practical solution from scope 1 to scope 3 to have a path for that. So last question maybe, Alban, because I know our time is counted, but it's okay, we're just on time, it's good. what kind of insights do you have? It's been 2 years. There's been a lot of learning. We had a lot of learning in our case as well as a company, because as I say, it's a two-way street. What are kind of the insights you had?
Well, trying to sum it up, I was trying to come up with just one word, and it happens to be one of the values here at ChangeNOW. It's humility. When you look at the scale of the problems you described, they've been around for a very long time. A lot of people have tried to solve them in a lot of different ways. And so I think we have to recognize that we cannot do it alone. And any of our organizations here in this room, however much money, good employees, talent you have, cannot do it. And so therefore, that's my hope. It's really that we can learn more from each other, replicate where it makes sense, but also just partner up where it does as well, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel each time. And we don't have much time, but we have so much talent and so much positive energy. I'm sure we can do it. I'm an optimist like you.
Thank you so much, Alban. Please give him a warm applause. And by the way, you can check his solution on the booth. There's a booth with Reforestum, so please stop by. I will just finish in 1 minute saying, this is the reason why I'm standing up with you today. I'm passionate, as you can feel, in my whole life, from a Live for Good Foundation Francesco mentioned, which is about unleashing the power of 300 social entrepreneurs in my country, in France, to come up with some innovative solution for the good. And do the same in Microsoft is a privilege. And you've got to be humble. I'm certainly humble myself about the task. I'm very clear. We are not going to do that alone. It's not about Microsoft. It's not about each one of the companies. But if we can bring the incredible power of those positive entrepreneurs, I think we have a shot at starting to make a positive change in the world. And the last comment I will make is, to do that, I do deeply believe as well that we need to do a change in our mindset. And I'm calling that a shift to a positive mindset. And a positive mindset is about embracing a positive leadership philosophy, which I'm trying to be a big practitioner of that is creating energy. I mean, the positive energy, this one, okay, without CO2s, the vibrancy you have between people, to bring along the change with the change makers so that all aligned with a clear mission, we can have a positive impact in the world. So that's the journey we are on as a company, Microsoft, and I'm excited to launch this initiative today. And please check with us today on the booth, and you can ping me on LinkedIn and other social media if you want. Love to hear from your projects, what you have to do, because I think the journey is just starting now. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. Thanks. Thank you very much for the exciting journey you shared and the inspiring examples also as well that Alban and many others in the room also bring to this forum of ChangeNOW. The next session will be in a slightly different format. We will be having a discussion, a dialogue with 3 key leaders of today in the field of social impact. I will let them come to the stage in a second, but very quickly, just to introduce them, probably first, Sofia, you are the CEO of Reach for Change, Swedish non-profit organization which acts all over the globe and over the past 10 years supported more than 1,000 social entrepreneurs to have an impact on society, but also to unlock their business success. Isabelle, you are Executive Vice President both at Orange as a company on CSR and diversity, and you're also heading Orange Foundation, who works daily and at scale on key topics of social innovation, such as education or digitization of the society. And then Isabelle will also join us. Isabelle is the head of the Bnpp Foundation. Bnpp Foundation is the most long-standing foundation. It was founded in 1984, actually when Jean-Philippe joined Microsoft. So almost 40 years as well, and today is one of the key players in driving and pushing for social impact through its activities. I welcome you on stage. Welcome here. Just to start maybe with you, Sofia, as I said, you have 1,000 social entrepreneurs that through your nonprofit got into social entrepreneurship, into impact. So probably you have a lot of examples in mind. My first question, considering the focus we're having on social innovation in our panel, is when it comes to social business, why is innovation so important?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here today. I think the common theme that we've heard today, and we just heard it now in this brilliant keynote, is that we are facing a systemic collapse. We are extracting more resources than we're regenerating. We are excluding more than we are including. We are facing enormous challenges. We just saw also that the results of COVID and the impact that has had on our planet and on our society. So for us at Reach for Change, the way we try to be positive is through social entrepreneurship and social innovation. Why is innovation so important? We see really important and exciting models where there are people who actually know the challenges of the community, that they're part of the community, they represent the community, they're facing these challenges themselves. They have the best ideas. They are the best innovators. They just need support to scale and to really be able to build their businesses. And secondly, what we see is an enormous need today to actually identify new solutions, adapt new things, and pivot business models. And this is extremely important in the social sector as well, when we see we've been doing things in the same way that is not really cutting it for many, many years. So innovation, I think, is critical, and empowering the local change makers, the local entrepreneurs from their community is critical, especially if we're going to reach the SDGs and really do it with this tenet of not leaving anybody behind, which is our ambition.
Thank you very much. To you, Elisabeth, maybe you play a role both in the company and the foundation of Orange. And as Sofia was saying, social entrepreneurs need support and need also to be helped to unlock the power and the value. Maybe through concrete examples of your experience at Orange, how can corporates achieve that goal?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be with you at ChangeNOW today. At Orange, we strongly believe that as a responsible player in telcos and in tech, we really need to support positive entrepreneurship. And we also strongly believe that social innovation is a driver for business. First of all, because it patches training and education in critical jobs and activities. So I'll give you one example, one figure. For pursuing its growth, the African continent in 2030 will need 230 million jobs, all related to digital skills. And so it's a critical challenge because in a continent where sometimes training is not affordable, or universities only give theoretical skills, it's really critical. And we, Orange, as an operator in 18 countries in Africa, we have a responsibility. So we decided to train differently for digital skills, and the flagship of this social innovation are our Orange Digital Centers. It's a unique place, free for all, where you can find different trainings in digital skills. And even from we can train young without any diploma. We can, thanks to our Fab Labs, thanks to the startup incubators, and it's really very efficient because there's a high ratio of young people coming to our Orange Digital Center, which are employed after. So 90% of the students of our 100 digital centers find jobs directly when they leave the ODCs. It's good for our business because as we train them, we recruit the best because we need them in our countries. But our great satisfaction is that yes, they found jobs when they go, they leave Orange Digital Centers, and there are many girls. I insist on that point because there is a lack of women in tech, and it's a challenge also, gender equity. So this is one example of how social innovation is a driver for business.
Thank you very much. Coming to you, Isabelle, as I said, you are heading one of the largest and oldest foundations in France, and through what you see also on ChangeNOW in the salon down there, you're probably also driving force to boost a lot of the innovations that are proposed, that we see, and that are created on a daily basis. How do you see the role of foundations in that ecosystem?
Well, the role of the foundations is very important. And to answer to your question, can you hear me well? Do not have the same mic.
This one works.
Merci. Oui, peut-être avec celui-ci. Thank you. I think it's okay with this one. To answer to your question, I would say two things. First of all, I do believe that philanthropy is very important for innovation and for business. As we can see downstairs, there are a lot of startups, but also a lot of associations and NGO. And in fact, for me, philanthropy is another name for innovation. What is philanthropy, in fact? Two things. It's taking time and taking risk. So, in fact, this is the definition of innovation. So if you support, as we do with the Bnpp Foundation, but I'm sure here we have a lot of representatives of other foundations, and as Elisabeth does with the Orange Foundation, we do know that, in fact, in all these associations, you have a power to innovate. You have a real social innovation spirit. Regarding what we do at Bnpp Foundation for almost 40 years, as you said, we have, in fact, the social innovation as a DNA. This is really at the heart of what we want to do, and this from the beginning. We want to support only, or mostly, I would say, associations that are driven, that are focused on social innovation. In the creative district, for culture, for environment, and for solidarity, which are our three topics. I would just say, for example, that L'Ascenseur, which is a new place built 3 years ago for social inequalities. We call it in French the QG de l'égalité des chances. L'Ascenseur, for me, is really one of the examples of social innovation. I could also mention the Nest, which is a kind of hub, expert hub, for all the experts we have. We have something like 400 experts in circular economy, in agroforestry. These are all the experts we have inside the company. So to give you maybe a kind of maybe definition of what I do each day is really to focus on social innovation and to support mostly the association, that are really driven by the innovative spirit.
Thank you. Getting back to you, Sofia, maybe, as I said, you have been working with a lot of entrepreneurs. Here at ChangeNOW, we focus on impact, social impact, of course, but it's also a stage of entrepreneurs, and an entrepreneur wants to be successful. So can you maybe share as an inspiration some success stories that you have witnessed from a social point, but also from a personal realization standpoint for these people?
Yeah, sure. I love that you bring up the skills and the youth in the African continent. There's a lot we need to do to create decent jobs and opportunities, so we don't exclude a large portion of the population. And we do work across Africa, and particularly in Ethiopia. I bring this example up because we heard just now also the effects of COVID also on unemployment, and how unemployment is increasing, and especially how women have really been locked out. Women are the first to lose their jobs, to lose capital, and to actually, be, brought backwards from COVID. And I have an opposite example, which is always nice to hear, with one of our entrepreneurs in Ethiopia who's actually grown her business from just being a single employee to having 30 employees during this period of COVID, through actually innovating and testing and adapting and pivoting her business model. And what she does is using recycled materials and using the leather goods industry, actually producing products with a workforce of unemployed women who come from very marginalized areas, and training them and giving them the confidence and the ability to work in her company, where she has the expertise in actually defining the product and developing the product and selling the product. So that for me is a perfect example of a kind of a local grassroots entrepreneur who's really done well during this period, and we can look to. And also, it wouldn't be possible without philanthropic capital. So I completely agree with you, the need to de-risk these kinds of investments for them to actually be able to prove their business model that then can be scaled up to the Microsofts and the other large corporates in this world.
Thanks. You mentioned, indeed, most of you, the impact of COVID. Now there is the impact of the war in Ukraine, the impact it will have on Africa from a feeding standpoint, the inflation in our societies. It started with COVID, but more and more the notion of resilience of our models comes as a top priority. Maybe Isabelle, how do you think social business and social innovation can play a role on the helping us building the resilience we will need in our models?
Yes, it's a context where we definitely more than ever have to be, we have to be resilient, and I think social innovation can also bring resilience regarding climate change. For instance, a resilient society is a resilient society where gender equality is respected. If I take again the example of the African continent, there's a huge gap of connectivity, of usage between women and men, and bridging this gap will help, will increase the GDP by $15 billion. So it's very important to think in a holistic way how social innovation can help fighting climate change by giving resilient solutions. And so that's why we decided to partner with UN Women and their program AgriFed. We bring to women in rural areas connectivity and also many digital tools that can help them optimizing their crop, selling their products via e-commerce, giving access to meteorological tools in order to build an environmentally friendly rural ecosystem. And this is absolutely so it's good for their business, but it's also good for our business because they use our solution on e-commerce. They use our solution of mobile money, and we have 58 million customers in Africa with Orange Money and 36% women. And so yes, it's a holistic approach, and partners are essential. So partnership between institutions, between GNOs, and between NGOs, and between companies.
Building on that, you mentioned the need for partnership, and maybe to you, Isabelle, I think in that field, coalitions can also play a role, coalition of players. How important do you think they are to the success of social innovation?
Well, as you say, and as Elisabeth says also, for me, coalition is the real innovation. Coalition is one of the ODD, but it's also really necessary in our world nowadays after COVID and with the war in Ukraine. So the coalition between foundations, NGO, companies is essential. In Europe, we can see that we don't have the same amount of philanthropy that the Americans do, or maybe the Nordics do. So it's really a pity that when you see the amount of philanthropy for environment with the climate change crisis, the total global and worldwide amount is 5% of the global philanthropy amount. So 5% is really too. This is really too less. You know, we really have to change this amount of environment philanthropy. So this is one of the maybe the purpose we can have together with a spirit of coalition to act more for climate change. This is one thing. And the other thing I would like to say is that maybe you were asking for the idea of coalition, but a foundation is also an accelerator for the transition, the social and environmental transition. In fact, a foundation can act as a booster, you know, to have more impact. And this is also another thing we can have in mind after the COVID, is to learn from the COVID situation. We have seen, as you said, Bnpp Foundation is one of the oldest foundations, so we have the experience to see and to have the vision of the past and to understand what works and what doesn't work. So we can also see that maybe if we have, you know, too many associations, too many NGOs acting, each one on its side, the coalition is really necessary because maybe there are not enough coalition between association and foundation. So we have maybe to have also more systemic change, as you said, Sophie. And this is really something a little bit new in France and in Europe. And we have to learn more maybe from the US and the Brits.
Thanks. Staying on that idea of also cooperation, Sofia, your nonprofit just struck a significant partnership with Tele2, telco operator in the Nordics. And I think it's a partnership that probably a lot of the social entrepreneurs we have here today would also like to get, how to create these partnerships between corporates, non-profit, and social initiatives. From your perspective and building on that experience, what's in it for a corporate like Tele2, for instance, to go into these kind of cooperations?
Yeah, well, I think almost we would turn the question today. It's not about talking about what's in it for the corporate. This is a vital business need today. And if you're not doing it, I think that you will be in trouble if you're not integrating these kinds of issues, as we heard this previously, all through the value chain. I share the trends. We do an annual survey as well with just how it looks in the Nordics with decision makers and you know, citizens and employees, and we see this very strongly, that there is a huge demand from customers, from employees, for actually corporates to take an active role in societal change. So not just in working on ESG or doing the basic requirements. And I think what we've seen the last years with you know, Black Lives Matter and you know, Fridays for Future and all these movements is that there's a push that is acting much, much faster than regulation can go. So future customers, customers of today, future employees, you know, to attract talent, they're demanding this. They're demanding the change quicker than I think that other stakeholders can. So for us, it's just about articulating the partnership in terms of, what returns are we looking for in terms of the social investment, and finding out really, what are the skills of the corporate, what can they contribute to. It's great examples here with the digital side, or, financial literacy or whatever that the corporate have, and really about articulating how can we match those with these grassroots innovations and to get them to scale, because that's another topic we haven't talked about or covered, but the scale is, how to scale is a big issue. So, so we need corporates to engage much more, I think, than we have today, and we're seeing a demand for that from lots of different actors.
Thank you. Talking about scale and the role corporates indeed can have to scale these impacts. The first level of scale for a corporate is probably the employees and the workforce that groups like yours have, which are significant. Maybe on a topic like the diversity, which is also a key component of the social innovation. Elisabeth, how do you see the topic of diversity as a value driver, to some extent, for the company in Orange?
Before answering your question, let me react to what has been said now, because I think we all agree that coalition is the key for social innovation, and even unexpected coalitions. Coming back to Orange Digital Center, our Orange Digital Center in Africa, we proved the efficiency of this approach, and we had some competitors that came to see us saying, hey, we would like to do some training to your places. They came, competitors like Google, etc., because we are more rooted in Africa, operating in the continent for 20 years, etc. And so we said, of course, we just opened the place, and so they train in cloud, etc., and everybody benefits, and the young people benefits first. So coalition is the key for social innovation. Diversity, yes, definitely. Social innovation is a business driver also through diversity, and just one example regarding disabilities and changing the mindset, etc. We have a lack of competency in cyber defense. We have a difficulties to attract talents in Orange cyber defense, which is a real engine growth for us. And at Orange Foundation, we have 30 years of expertise on autism. So we know that some autistic talents have special skills in data and AI and cyber defense, and so we designed a program to recruit more talents with autism, and it's really a social innovation itself for the company, because we implemented a task force with, for instance, medicine, work medicine, and so it's the first time our doctors were involved in a recruitment program, and so it attracted a lot of enthusiasm, and we started the program, and so yes, changing the mindset is also key for social innovation.
Thank you. We have 10 seconds left. Maybe just in a sentence from the three of you, what advice would you give to a social entrepreneur today?
Promote women.
Thank you.
And if I have one word again, I would say that I have quite an experience in the NGOs, and I've always met incredible women for the last 30 years. And you see, we are only women on this panel, sorry.
My pleasure.
And promote youth also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And with no transition, actually, we will move to the next section. I see Esther Duflo has joined us. Hello, Esther. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent, and we can hear you. Just a few words thank you, first of all, for joining us, although remotely. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you in this session where we talk about social innovation as a value for business and as a driver also for business growth. I will introduce you very shortly, but I honestly don't even think that you really need an introduction. I'm sure all the people in the room know who you are, your talent and your achievements and contribution. You are an economist. You actually started in 2003 by founding the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab. Few years later, in 2019, you shared the Nobel Prize for Economics with Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kramer for, and I quote, your experimental approach to alleviating global poverty. You are a professor at MIT on poverty alleviation and development of economics, and you are one of the most cited author on economic courses through the publications that you contributed with throughout the years. Starting maybe really from the topic of your focus, which is around poverty alleviation, and something that one of the speakers just earlier was saying, that over the past 2 years, through COVID crisis and through the dynamics that we see at global level, poverty has increased, actually, as a fact. From your knowledge, how can we explain that, and how can we still remain optimistic on that side?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for this question. So poverty has increased. The explanation is very simple. The COVID crisis was a massive shock at the world level. But the ability to react and to protect people from this shock was very different in poorer countries and in richer countries. The richest countries spend about 20% of their GDP on fiscal stimulus measures. So this is, whatever it costs type measure, keeping people employed, supporting small businesses, and so on and so forth. And therefore, there was really a very effective protection of even the most vulnerable in the rich countries. So even in the US, for example, which is not known for its solidarity in general, poverty really didn't increase during the COVID crisis. Now, what happened in poor countries is that they weren't able to borrow like the rich countries did. In the poorest country, the fiscal stimulus measures were only about 2% of their GDP. And of course, it's 2% of a much smaller GDP, so they had much less to spend to protect their citizens, to maintain basic services, and so on. So the result of that is not only poverty in terms of income poverty increased, hunger increased, but also some of the basic social services that people came to expect. For example, immunization, schooling, all of that just stopped. And it hasn't really restarted. There has, for example, been huge outbreaks of measles due to a lag in measles vaccination in Sierra Leone, in the Congo, and we are probably going to find some more in the months to come, simply because the immunization campaign stopped during COVID and haven't really restarted. So that's just the basic fact. Now, there are maybe two things we need to do to explain these basic facts. Is why is it that the poor countries only had to spend 2% of their GDP? So the first thing I said is that, unlike the rich countries, they were unable to borrow. But I think we need to ask ourselves the hard question of why isn't it that the rich countries couldn't find the wherewithal to spend some small fraction of the money they were spending on themselves to at least have the same level in proportion of GDP for poor countries, which of course would have been much less money since the GDPs are smaller. It is something that several of us have been calling for from the very beginning of the pandemic, and that hasn't happened neither during the pandemic nor after. And then the second thing is in the richer countries in Europe, in the US, the economies really bounce back very rapidly post-crisis. In the developing countries, it has been much more uneven, in part because there are phenomenon of poverty cycle, vicious cycles of poverty, or poverty traps, which is that when something, for example, either a person, for example, had a small business and lose it, it's not easy to restart even once conditions get back to normal. They might not be able to borrow, they might not get a grant for restarting their business. So at the individual level, you know, some people have lost everything, and rebuilding is actually costly. At a country level, similarly, some systems got so disorganized, for example, immunization or schools, that restarting them in earnest is going to take some time. So why am I still optimistic? Because in a sense that although the last couple of years have been bad for developing countries, the 3 decades before that have been quite good. Since 1990 until the COVID crisis, poverty had been declining very fast. Infant mortality, maternal mortality had been divided by 2. Almost every kid before the COVID crisis was going to school and was in fact completing primary school in most countries. So by and large, this was actually over, since 1990, a real story of progress. And I think we can go back to this story of progress, maybe with a little bit of kickstart help at the beginning, but the energy, the commitment, the forces is in the countries themselves, and they have been able to make substantial progress before the current episode.
Thank you. It's interesting what you are saying about the optimism and the opportunity indeed to bounce back. We spent with the previous speakers quite some time discussing about the dimension of innovation and social innovation and the impact that this can have on societies, on value creation. Your work also includes a lot of experimental work on the field. So you know quite well these societies, for instance, in Africa. As of today, do you see the opportunity there for social innovation? If we want to accelerate on that field, what needs to happen? What do we need to have?
Well, in developing countries, social innovations has not waited for us. It has not waited for social entrepreneurs. And we find these social innovations everywhere. There is a crucial need for innovation, of course, because there is a need for what we classically think of innovation, like new technological progress, for example. There was someone from Orange in the last panel, the development of digital money and the spread of digital money in Africa has been a complete game changer. And in fact, has been during the COVID crisis a lifesaver as well. For example, Togo, within literally weeks of the pandemic, was able to put in place a cash transfer for poor people who were in places that needed to be locked down, using this kind of digital money innovation as a backbone. People got money on the digital wallets. All of the phone operators agreed to go back on the same platform, and using some extra innovation, for example, on how to quickly identify people who might need help, using cell phone metadata, using satellite data on the condition of the regions in which they live, as well as, of course, the need for a lockdown in a particular town. So I think this is a remarkable story because that innovation happened in a matter of weeks. It was driven by the Togolese government, in particular the Minister for Digital Transformation, and they combined, in a sense, the nimbleness and pragmatism to make this program happen, and this happened really with their own, energy and drive. What was also remarkable is that this was based on they had a few conversations with various people, including me, on what they should be doing. And early on, the idea was that it was a much more traditional idea, which is, people need to eat, so we are going to deliver food. And through conversation and through exposure to experiences in other countries, randomized control trials that had been done in many, many other countries comparing a cash transfer versus food transfer, they were able to see that, in fact, cash transfers, in particular in period of crisis, are more cost-effective and more effective and easier to deliver quickly. And so they were able to pivot from their original idea to this idea of cash transfer, and then from cash transfer to electronic money, based on all the innovation that had been tried in other times in other countries and that people had learned from. So a key, I think, element that's essential in not only spurring innovation, but spurring innovation in a good way that's going to lead to effective public policy is to work with countries, first of all, to answer, so that they can answer their own problems with their own solutions, and that they can rely on a toolbox of things that have been tried in many other countries in the South. And I think what has happened in the last 10 to 20 years, which accounts for some of the social progress that was mentioning was happening before COVID, is a huge increase in learning that happens from one developing country to the other, as opposed to people, you know, the traditional model of people coming from the West with their bright idea and showing how it's done. And that has been made possible in part by the spread of randomized evaluation, A/B testing, quick, you know, attempts, fail fast, etc., and the spread of that culture within governments itself.
It's interesting because it's really almost a notion of leapfrogging, because what you're mentioning is really the adoption of what in corporate we would call agile ways of working at the scale of nations and at the scale of a continent. These methods are new methods that somehow also need to be learned. How important is education to foster this social innovation? And today, what do you see as key drivers for this education?
Yes, you're absolutely right. These methods are new methods. They need to be learned, and they can be learned. They have the advantage of being relatively, they are not rocket science. They are new methods, but they can be learned. And in fact, they can be learned at various stages in people's career. So what's really essential is for people to have, of course, a good basis. And there we have the role of primary and secondary education, not only sending kids to school, but making sure that they are in school and learning well. So there is a need of innovation there, especially post-COVID with basically the bombshell that happened to the education sectors. And then, but also on top of that, and that relates maybe more closely to your question, is the opportunity for people at various stages of their career to access excellent training opportunities. And today, those opportunities are a little bit circumscribed by the fact that you have to prove your worth in a way that is a traditional way. And if you started by going to university in a not very well-known university somewhere in Nigeria, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to prove that you would be a good contributor to an MBA program, to the public policy program, or to even a shorter training program. So what we are trying to do at MIT, where I teach, and at the Poverty Action Lab, is to disrupt that a little bit by combining the power of online education and the power of bringing people together. So what we are doing is that we are opening online classes, including online classes on how to run randomized control trials, since it's what we do, but the model could be applied to other things. Economics, statistics, data science, etc., that are accessible but serious. And once people complete a course of that, they can take exams, and we then use, on the basis of this exam, actually admit people to complete their programs at MIT. And we have scholarships for people to come and so on. So what had to be done in 2 years at huge personal and financial cost can now be done in a much shorter period of time in residence to complete with an MIT level education. And what is remarkable in our experience, we've now had 3 cohorts at MIT, is that the students we are getting have incredible stories. They all have great experience. They're coming from all over the world. They've worked for companies, they work for tech, they work for governments, they work for NGOs. And then when they come, they're actually the best in their classes in terms of the pure academic. And in addition, of course, they are bringing this wealth of diversity and experience to the classroom, which is of the benefit to everyone. So once you, this is really, I think, an important move, because that really creates a change in paradigm of higher education, where, you know, too often we see a trade-off between, oh, there is a need to educate, you know, those people, versus if we only took people who looked exactly like us, we would have a great program. But in fact, that trade-off just does not exist. That you will get better education by selecting people on a more transparent way that doesn't rely on old boys networks, and by bringing these excellent people who otherwise wouldn't have had a chance.
Thank you, very inspiring, and actually good example also of some of the dimensions around the value and the richness of diversity that companies, but also society, indeed can unlock. One maybe last question for you. We have in the room a lot of entrepreneurs focus on social impact, on environmental, with this idea really of making a difference on the big causes, social and environmental causes. Based on your experience, if you had one piece of advice that you could give them, what would it be?
It would be do one of two things. Either do something that someone else has done and has proven to be effective, or if you really want to pursue your bright idea, measure your impact. And when I say measure impact, is measure it for real. Measure it with a proper counterfactual. You know, it could be an experiment, it could be a natural experiment, but measure it for real. The sector of social entrepreneurship is characterized by great enthusiasm and energy, and a somewhat naive approach to what constitutes impact, what works, what doesn't work, etc. And this is, I'm having these conversations over and over and over again with various people, saying, oh, but you know, if I count the number of people who took my product, that's impact, because you know the product is good. So if there are more people who take it, that's obviously a sign of impact. And this is, of course, ignoring the inconvenient possibility that perhaps the impact of the product itself is not that good. So we need to become really serious about measuring impact of impact investments, to not get into a sort of impact washing on a mega scale. And that's possible in a sense. 20 years ago, the field of NGOs and public policies was also discovering how we measure impact and why it's important. And great progress have been made. And I think that has really improved the quality of lives of people, because now hundreds of millions of people have been touched by policies which are effective, as opposed to policies that may or may not, or we don't know. I think the same thing needs to be done with social impact, so you don't get a movement from fad to fad about what may be exciting or what may be great at a moment in time, only to realize several years later that this enthusiasm might not have been justified. So measure impact, innovate is fine, but then be really, really, really serious about the impact. Or actually, it is also fine to just, you know, scale up or move in another country something that has proven to be effective elsewhere. That's okay too, and that's perhaps a great value in many cases.
Thank you very much, Esther.
Thank you.
That's the end of the session. Thank you very much to all of you for the attendance, to the speakers, and we hope that you will go back to your desk or to your home with an inspiring example on how social innovation can bring value and how social innovation is key for the value for our society. Thank you.